morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly White, and I'm the chair of the Naperville Area Chamber of Commerce D&I Committee, and I want to thank you and welcome you to today's discussion. We are super excited to bring this program to you today. Program is titled Open for Business, How Open Are You? How Inclusivity Hits Your Bottom Line. You will hear some great advice from people, ladies that are friends of mine, personal friends of mine, on the importance of inclusion in your bottom line. I just want to say thank you to Christine, Janice, and Jackie for agreeing to serve on the panel. Jackie, I know it's super early out there for you in Seattle, so thank you for hopping on early for us. And I, again, want to thank the committee. We are a committee of about 20 people. This committee started when our new CEO and president of the chamber came on board in October and wanted to, it was really a goal of hers to get a DEI committee started in the Naperville area. So I want to say thank you to our CEO and president of the chamber, Jacqueline Griswold, for doing that, and also want to thank our committee for working hard and diligently throughout the last few months as we've been putting together some great programming. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to the NACC President and CEO, Ms. Jacqueline Griswold. Jacqueline?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Kim, and thank you to the entire committee. Kim, you took my idea and kind of ran with it and have this group of incredibly passionate people putting together some fantastic programming. Really looking forward to the program today. With that said, I want to remind everybody that we're going to record this program. So people who, if they weren't able to join us today, they can watch it later. I think this program is going to be just chock full of incredibly valuable information. So I wanted to let you know it is being recorded. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator today. Our moderator is Mina Banashak from Phoenix, and she is going to moderate for us. She's been such a wonderful, fantastic addition to this committee, and I will toss it over to Mina.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mina Banashak. I'm a member of the Chamber's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and I work at Phoenix Packaging as the Director of Quality and Food Safety. I am honored to be your moderator for this discussion today, and I want to encourage your active participation. The one thing I will say, though, is when you're not actively participating, if you could please mute your line just to help keep the noise level down in the background. We will be putting up a few poll questions throughout the session for you to respond to. And we also invite you to submit questions to our panelists by typing them directly into the chat window. We will try to address as many of them as time permits. I'm going to do a quick sound check with the group to be sure that everyone is hearing me speak clearly without an echo. I'm getting a bit of an echo, so I want to, again, ask everyone who's not speaking right now if they could mute their mic. Okay, thank you. So as we get started, I want to get everyone grounded on a few key definitions. And so we do have a slide we're going to pull up here just in a second. The words that we've used here, even just in introducing our committee, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are richly complex and meaningful terms. We could spend hours talking about any one of them, and the extent to which each of us understands and applies these words is probably pretty varied. So for the purpose of our discussion today, we are going to work from these definitions where diversity is the condition of having or being composed of differing elements or qualities. And what's listed here is not exhaustive, but there's just a few examples. Equity is justice according to natural law or right, and further defined as freedom from bias or favoritism. And inclusion is the act or practice of including and accommodating people who have historically been excluded. And that term is circled because inclusion is the concept that we will most heavily be centered on in today's dialogue, because we're here to talk about why inclusivity matters, what it is, and how to demonstrate it. So to help lead us through this discussion, we are so very fortunate, as you heard Kim say, to have three amazing women with us today who can speak to the power of inclusivity and its impact on your bottom line. I am pleased to welcome Jacqueline Howard, Christine Jeffries, and Janice Parks. Jacqueline Howard is Vice President, Global Food Supply Chain with Starbucks. She is currently charged with establishing the sustainable end-to-end architecture for the Starbucks food supply chain. Prior to joining Starbucks, she spent nearly 20 years providing leadership at McDonald's, including serving as Vice President, Supply Chain Management for McDonald's China. She also has 10 years of experience in sales and marketing with DuPont. Welcome, Jacqueline. Christine Jeffries is president of the Naperville Development Partnership, which is a public-private economic development organization that fosters economic growth in the city of Naperville. Christine has served as the NDP president for over 20 years, and under her leadership, the NDP has been responsible for millions of square feet of new construction, large-scale absorption of existing commercial space, and has participated in the crafting of planning and redevelopment guides for retail corridors and the downtown area of the city. The work of the NDP has resulted in thousands of new jobs and an exceptional vibrancy in the business districts throughout the city of Naperville, as well as a strong partnership with the city toward municipal community development. Thank you, Christine, for joining us today. And Janice Parks is the Chief Human Resources Officer for First Hospitality, a leading hotel management, acquisition, and development company located in Rosemont, Illinois. In this role, Janice is responsible for developing and executing all aspects of First Hospitality's people strategy, including talent management, organizational development, culture transformation, thought leadership, diversity and inclusion, and executive coaching. Prior to joining First Hospitality, Janice worked for the McDonald's Corporation in Chicago, where she held multiple leadership roles, including Senior Director of Global Diversity and Inclusion, and most recently, Global Human Resources Officer, where she led strategic human resources for the $27 billion restaurant business in 22 U.S. regions across multiple functions. Thank you, Janice, for joining us. So with our introductions complete, we will go now to our first poll question to give our panelists some insight into what our audience members' opinions are. So you should see this poll question on your screen, and the question is, do you believe there are benefits to diversifying your organization to increase performance and decrease turnover? So go ahead and take a few seconds here to submit your responses, and we'll have a look at what the results are. We got strong participation here, which is great. That's what I had asked for at the beginning, so thank you. Just a couple more seconds here. All right, so let's close the poll and share the results. It's pretty strong. It looks like the results indicate that of the people who responded, and thank you, we've got 86% who believe that there are benefits to diversifying your organization, and we have a few who are not sure. So for those of you who are not sure, not as convinced, this session may help to sway your opinion. So I want to pull one more slide up before we really get into our dialogue. So keeping these poll results in mind, let's take a look at another slide. We have some compelling statistics that make the case for diversity and inclusion. There's a 17% increase in team performance, as you see on the slide, for companies with inclusive cultures, 30% higher revenue per employee, over $30 billion a year in turnover costs for companies without inclusive practices. and a 33% likelihood of companies with strong racial diversity to outperform their peers. So these numbers make a really strong pitch for diversity and inclusion, and I'd like now to hear how our panelists might echo the same idea. So Jacqueline, I'd love for you to get us started here this morning. Could you please share your viewpoint as to why it is important for businesses to consider how inclusivity hits their bottom line?
Well, sure, you're asked the early bird on the West Coast to start, right? So thank goodness I had my Starbucks coffee to start. Well, it's almost too obvious, I guess, for those who have been in inclusive environments, but for those who haven't necessarily enjoyed the benefits of inclusive environments, the biggest part for me personally is seeing myself in the room, or seeing people that have the same cultural affinity in the room or allies in the room. And so with that, it provides me comfort, and I actually relax in order to be my best self. So the environment that is inclusive, that looks like the customers, for example, that we service at retail, makes me feel as though we're really answering the call of expectations of the partners who work at Starbucks, who want to feel as though they are thought of, they're listened to, and they're seen. And so part of that is basically seeing people who look like you, who are in your community, that work with you. And so for that reason, if I bring my best self to work, then my mind is all about making sure that my work is very sound, and my results are very good as a result, because I'm not stressed, I'm not feeling uncomfortable, I'm not being ignored, I'm being included in the conversation, and I'm being asked for my opinion. And so it's as simple as that. In any organization, in any relationship, you want to feel included, listened to, and seen. And with that just comes a lot of energy and purpose, and you can't wait to get to work. You can't wait to make a difference. And we hear that from our partners, from the retail stores all the way through our regional offices across the globe, is that environment that is Starbucks, for example, really, really makes you feel like you want to bring your best self. And when you bring your best self, you get the best results.
That's terrific. Thank you. Christine, how would you reflect on the same question? How is it important that businesses consider inclusivity when it hits their bottom line?
Well, first, I'd like to thank, as I sent a note to Kim White yesterday, I'm sort of gobsmacked over the people on this panel. I watched Janice's interview on NCTV, and I look at Jacqueline and her background, and I'm truly just amazed at the work you ladies do. So I guess I come at it from business development and what makes businesses strong. Clearly, diversity has been on the platform for, well, I've been in this business for 35 years, and it is a constant, and a constant changing on the inclusion. What we do know is that if one person doesn't feel included, the whole team doesn't feel included. Inclusion is universal. Sometimes it comes by way of race, sometimes it's ethnicity, sometimes it's not visible. So you may have somebody with a disability or different cultural backgrounds that might not be apparent when you first meet. So I always say it's so important to be inclusive all the time with everybody, because you have no idea where their background lies and what their challenges through life were coming to the table. So again, if one person's not included, nobody's going to feel included. I would also say, being that I'm probably in the older age group, that having that diversity of age goes with culture. And I keep thinking if we all thought the same way, we'd still be making buggy whips today. And if we didn't have input from different cultures, from different countries, from different backgrounds, we would never be able to be that innovative organization that we need to be.
That's perfect. Thank you, Christine. Janice, what's your perspective on the same?
Since the folks before me spoke so great, I think, about from a business perspective. Jacqueline talked about a personal perspective as well. I'm now in the hotel industry. 60% of our employees are male, 40% are female. However, females and people of color represent a much lower representation of management positions across the organization. So just think about that for a second. We've got more Latinos and African Americans in our business and across hospitality that are more in the, you know, the hotel, housekeeper roles or lower level positions. It's so important as businesses think about diversity and inclusion today to think about how do I support the growth and development of those individuals who may look at a person like me or Jackie or anybody else on this panel and say, I want to be like her, or I want to be like him. I want the opportunities as well to seek advantages and support for my family and the growth of my own personal being as a professional in the industry of hospitality. So it's so important, I think, as we're doing a lot of work in our own company to really understand the perspective of the employee that are in these lower represented roles, how we can further develop, how can we train, and most importantly, how do we support them once they get into the job, right? So when there are people around you that look like you, that fosters that same level of support and passion around diversity, you will more likely be successful in that role. If I'm in a role and there's nobody around me that looks like me, thinks like me, or has my perspective on the business, I'm not as likely to be successful. So I think it is important as we're in this new wave of change. You know, I have young people in my life that are looking at the world right now, and they're looking at me as a leader, and all of you probably, to say, how are we going to get over this hump? This, for me and for other panelists, we've been in this space for a long time. Unfortunately, the George Floyd incident brought a lot of things to light for us in a very unfortunate way. We have a great opportunity now. I hope businesses take advantage of this, what I call this open window of opportunity, to really look at the landscape of their own business and the landscape of their employees. What does that look like for you? And do you have people who can represent your company? We have guests of all ethnicities that visit our hotels, and my front desk employees do not represent that at all. So we have to continue to work at that. We have to be purposeful. We have to be deliberate. And a lot of businesses don't want to hear that. Purposeful and deliberate in the decisions and the choices that we're going to make. So happy to be here, happy to have this discussion, because I think it's a long-term discussion for us. This isn't going to go away in a week, a month, and a year. We have to be brave and forthright and willing to come forward and have these conversations that are uncomfortable for that 14% who aren't sure or don't know or may not have been in a situation where this seems to matter in their business, but it matters.
Thank you. Just some fantastic insight. And there's one thing in particular that you said that I think ties in really well to another question we do want to ask our audience. So you said how important it is to support the growth and development of our lesser served individuals that are parts of our organizations, and to be purposeful and deliberate about how to achieve that. And so if we call up our second poll question, we're looking to ask everyone, think about your organization right now. Do you have a strategy that exists to increase inclusivity within your organization? Because we've talked now for a few minutes about how important it really is and the why, but now we want to talk about the how, right? So let's give folks a little bit of time here to think about their response, and then we will share the results. And I'll mention one other thing as folks are responding is just a quick reminder that as you're reflecting on the comments our panelists are sharing with us, please do think about what questions you might like to ask them, and just go ahead and type those directly into the chat window. And again, we'll get to as many of those as we can. All right, I'm seeing we've got about 75% of attendees who have responded. Let's see if we can't get that number up just a bit higher. If you haven't voted, go ahead and vote, please. All right, let's call it there and share the results. So does a strategy exist? We have about 60% who have said yes, a strategy does exist to increase inclusivity. 30% have said no, there isn't currently a strategy, and about 10% have said not sure. So I think this is an important thing to consider, given that we largely agree that it's important, but we don't as readily know how to get there and what to do. I'm really pleased to see that there is a strong response saying yes, you know, we do have a strategy. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So when we talk about how to gauge whether or not an organization is being inclusive, how do you measure or respond to and influence perception, right? So some of us who are attending here and have answered, I'm not sure if there's a strategy. Is that a perception issue, or is it truly that there isn't a strategy and it's not being communicated well? So how do you measure and respond to and influence perception is the first question I want to put out there, keeping in mind that you want to consider both your patrons or your clients, your customers, as well as your employees' perspective. So Christine, can I ask you to start with this one, perception on whether or not an organization is being inclusive?
So, you know, when I look at the response, I would guess that most of the people that have a larger workforce probably have more departments. You know, we laugh sometimes at our office when the server has to be rebooted. I'm IT. When we were closing the office, I was bookkeeper writing checks. And so in a small office, it's kind of all hands on deck, and you're really just sort of looking who can fill the role of what needs to be done. When you go out into the sort of the bigger perspectives, and I'm looking at places like NICOR Gas, and I had a great conversation with Marty Sheeman, and it is a company that is truly dedicated to their diversity, and it didn't happen yesterday. I mean, this has been going on for decades, and they're deeply committed. So I think when people are looking at how they set their policies and how they can manage it, there are certain organizations and agencies, I think, that have, through the years, been far more progressive. And I know people will laugh when I say this because people don't often think of the government as being progressive. But when you look at different government agencies, you will find far more advanced diversity programs, whether it's you know, in the management positions at the post office. You'll see an incredible blend of cultures, of race, ethnicity, gender. And, you know, they've always been very good at developing people from within and advancing them. NICOR, the leadership there, I mean, it starts from the top. There's the CEO is a man of color, and he's retiring, and a new gentleman is coming in, and he is Black also. But they have developed programs and protocols and support systems that is hard to do, and I guess the challenge is for small businesses, which most of us are, that we don't have those resources. So it does help to watch kind of what the big guys are doing, and the fact that they will share that, such as Marty sharing with my organization some of the steps that they take. So those are some of the things that I think are important. When I see that graph of who has and who doesn't have, chances are the employment policy is written by, you know, or copied off the internet, and they don't have the resources. So I think that's another area where we could really trickle down from the big companies.
Thank you, Christine. You know, and I think that is likely to be something that the Chamber wants to continue to provide support in the space of making those connections between the resources that our larger member companies have and have already, you know, kind of built the path toward setting in place some of those practices and policies to help the smaller organizations who don't have as many resources available to them to start to learn and enact some of the same. So it's good to know that NICOR has your vote for some good behaviors and practices there. Thank you. Janice, can you give your perspective on this question too? I know you said that you have a diverse guest population who may not always see themselves represented when they come in and check in at the front desk. So how do you reconcile that in how your clients or customers see diversity represented and how that relates to a perception of an inclusive organization?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the most important thing to do is to talk to your employees and ask them how they feel about the work that they're doing, you know, what experiences would they like to achieve in working there. And sometimes the small things are the things that we forget to do as employers. Christine talked about a policy or a handbook that provides that guidance. A policy or a handbook is great, but it's what do you do with whatever you put into that policy or that guidebook that really is going to make the difference and set you apart. What we've learned in our own business is that many of our roles get filled by asking employees, who do you know? Do you have a friend that has this experience? And they generally do. And these are great people who say, you know, my friend wants to work here, or I have a former coworker from another company that wants to work here. And these individuals seem to get invited to the table. They get invited to the interview. And because they know someone in the company, they then get hired. And you say, there's nothing wrong with that. We'd like people who know other people and who can vouch for that employee who may have the experience that we're looking for. What we fail to do is to look beyond that bubble and say, if I truly, as a company, want representation that's broad and diverse and inclusive, I've got to go beyond my core group that may look the same, may come to the table with the same ideas. And if we want to diversify, we're going to have to think differently about that. I really liked your question about having a strategy or not having a strategy. I'm not sure if companies really realize if they have a strategy, if they don't have a strategy. It all depends on your perspective and what that means. But most importantly, it's what do you do with it if you think you have one? So I applaud the people that said, no, I don't have one, or I'm not sure. I think at our own company, we had to step back and say, what is our strategy? What is our take? I think we're still figuring it out. We're figuring out what we want. We've had employees ask, are you going to put a number to what you want to see in terms of diversity? And our stance is no, because we want to hire qualified individuals. And we want to be deliberate and purposeful about making sure that we open that range of people to people of color. And I've had to be very specific as a CHRO what that means. And we want to be inclusive to people who may not look like the majority of the people. That's not going to happen overnight. There's learning. We're partnering with a company called Franklin Covey to help us understand unconscious bias. We all have it. When I first started at First Hospitality and I said those words, people thought, what is she saying? What does she think of me? And so we have to teach. I'm staying away from the word train. I don't know that you can train people. You have to want to learn differences and what that looks like, and you have to get inside your own biases. By the way, we all have them, and we have to work hard at working around those so that we make decisions that are fair and inclusive.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Janice, for that insight. Jacqueline, what can you say from your experiences in this regard? Again, managing and responding to perception of whether or not an organization is being inclusive and how that helps to drive strategy.
Yes, well, you know, it's interesting, and everything that both Christine and Janice mentioned are critical. But most importantly, you know, we have a mission statement at Starbucks, and then every company of any significance has a mission statement, but it isn't real until it's activated. And I think, you know, upon what Janice just said, it's only true to people when they see it in action. And so if I'm walking around as a vice president, I'm not being inclusive, if I'm not living the mission and values of Starbucks in a very either overt or covert way, it means something, right? And so if they can't see it manifest itself in our activities, then no matter what you say or put on the wall or have in a brochure, it doesn't make a difference. And so we are always doubling back and checking ourselves to make sure that the words are activated by actions consistently, not just when it's convenient. I also do like the idea of intentionality. One of the things for sure that we like to do at Starbucks is to take in information. So we ask our employees in our partner engagement survey, how do you feel? Like, how do you really feel about your leadership, your tools, the resources, the fact of your actually embracing and us embracing our mission and values. So we do take these employee or partner, as we call ourselves, because we all own part of the business, our partner engagement surveys. And they really have helped us get a pulse check and a benchmark on where employees are feeling. One of the most important questions that we ask is, would you recommend Starbucks to a friend or someone outside of the network? And if that comes to a yes or a no, that is representative of whether or not we're living our mission and values. It's really quite simple. And then we've asked, do you have the tools you need to do your job? Because that can provide a source of elation or frustration. So if Christine is looked upon as being the IT expert and the mail carrier and all these things that her job description didn't say, then that's ridiculous. You signed up for a certain job, you want to have a career, you want to be nurtured and developed. And so if those things are not made real, again, people are dissatisfied. And the other aspirational goal that we have is, best jobs in retail. And we all know, if you've ever worked retail, it's very difficult. I can sit in a corporate office and now working from home and make decisions and put forth initiatives, but they can't be executed with rigor, with consistency at the store level. It just doesn't make any sense. So we want our partners at the store who touch our customers to feel as though we care about them, we see them, we know their stress levels. And so those best jobs in retail include living mission and values and having a place where you can grow your career. And I'm proud to say that a number of our leaders have actually started their careers at retail. And just like when I was at McDonald's, same thing. A lot of people were grown organically because we nurtured and developed them. So the other pieces too is, I go back to the safe environment piece. So when we do ratings with our leadership and our partners, we make sure that they live our mission and values, that they of course achieve results, right? That's almost first and foremost. But you would do it in such a way that you don't leave bodies behind. So you do it in such a way that you're helping others succeed in their pursuit of their careers and their environment in which they can thrive. So there's a lot of detailed, discussions we have, which are called these courageous conversations or performance development conversations, in which we are double backing and checking whether or not you're providing that nurturing environment as a people leader. And so I personally could not work for a company that did not have a strong mission, a strong value system aligned with my own personal values. And I have to see it manifest itself. And then as an officer of the company, I am required to report it when it doesn't happen. So I have let partners know, if you feel uncomfortable, we have a code of conduct, we have business conduct expectations. You should not tolerate things that are not acceptable. And I've been quite surprised actually with some young people, no matter where I've worked, that they think this is about how you work in corporate America, to allow for these kind of behaviors that are not conducive to a safe and healthful work environment. So I've let people know that respect is not negotiable, and that if you feel uncomfortable, you should always come to someone who can help you in a confidential manner take care of it. We don't want to lose people because we've breached any of those mission and values. So hopefully it's helped answer the question a bit.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think I'm going to ask you to keep going with an extension to some of the same things you spoke through. Because I heard you say it, I heard Janice say it, and Christine as well, which is, it's not just about what you have in a written policy or in a handbook, but like you said, it's about living it out loud, about really clearly manifesting it in action. So when we consider that we have a portion of our attendees who do have a strategy in place, but several others who don't, a lot of times we think that first step is to define that mission statement, to define what our values are as an organization, and then turn that into a policy with some goals or metrics. So can you speak a little bit to maybe one particular example of how you make that transition from the policy on paper to a fully manifest and visible practice that defines that inclusive environment?
Yeah, sure. I certainly can take that. In fact, I was going to offer to Janice, you don't have to pay for a consultant because we can give you an unconscious bias training for absolutely free. In fact, we created this unconscious bias training as a result of an incident that happened in Philadelphia in 2018. And as a result of that incident in Philadelphia, where 2 African-American men were arrested for what was considered a violation of the third place. We later took care of that in a different way, but we actually had to double back and say, do we have a situation where we have unconscious bias at Starbucks? And we do. And to Jance's point, we all have unconscious bias. We've been raised in certain ways. We've been told certain things. We've seen activities and behaviors that influence the way we act and treat others. So with that, that tool actually was so well done, and it's actually available online for free to anyone who wants to use it. And I've gotten requests from people, from city council people to churches to other organizations to academic folks who really do want to take this on. And we've actually made it free, of course, to our suppliers. And it helps to nurture that environment in which you understand first, where are you? And we all had to take the course. It was not like, okay, if you feel like it, it was a day of reckoning. We actually closed our stores and trained all of our partners at retail. And we also trained ourselves in each corporate office. And so it was really quite interesting. We had discussion groups, and we used that as a tool to double back and check ourselves. In fact, this coming fiscal year, we're going to, as my team is about 25 people in my specific food supply chain sourcing team, we're going to go through it ourselves because we have new partners. We need a refresh. And we have to remember, when you take classes like this, you should take them together. And then you should talk it out. And you should think about, what does this mean to me personally? What will I do differently now that I understand where I am? So that's an example, a really clean example of, making these things real and actionable.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christine, do you have one that you can share in terms of a policy that you have seen in writing, but that has been then translated into meaningful action to achieve a tangible result?
Well, again, I think with each new news release and new issues that arise right now with the racial equity, and I think the movement that's in place right now has become very important. Last year, sexual harassment and the Me Too movement was bubbling to the surface. And so at that time, our office went through, and we're all required to have, but our office as a group went through sexual harassment training. And thank you to the city of Naperville for working with us on those programs. I'm hoping the offer for Starbucks training for inherent bias is available to all of us, and I think Jacqueline said it is. I think it's important because not just including racial, but I think people bring a bias to everybody that walks in the room. My mother raised 6 kids, and she said, boy, I sure hope the world is really a welcoming place because you're all so different that I hope people can accept so many differences. And now picture that in the world we live in. Everybody needs to be, in a perfect world, you get rid of your biases. I'm very tall. So when I walk in a room, I'm sure people go, oh my God, in 8th grade, she was 5'9". And so everything is visual. And I think that's important in how you treat each other. And I go back to, if there is one person in my office, and I think anybody in business should look at, if there is somebody who gets up in the morning and is afraid to come to work, or feels left out, or actually bullied, and that's still occurring in a lot of places. And it spans a lot of different backgrounds, cultures, race. And I think if you have even one employee that walks in and feels that they're being bullied and they're not being listened to and they're not being included, then I think you have a cultural issue throughout your organization. So, and we all know people who say, I hate going to work. Somebody there is mistreating them or disrespecting them. So I think the work environment, and as Jacqueline and Janice both say, the work to be done is primary, but how you treat each other with respect and courtesy is critical. And I think anybody in my office will tell you that that is my number one thing, is that everybody is kind to each other and open to ideas. I think that's the most important thing. It's compassion and kindness and getting the job done.
Definitely. Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is, it may be that the organizations who are attending here today have that intent, have that mission already kind of sketched out, but to really know deeply within all levels of their organization if that's truly what's at play and that is the current state, takes a lot of listening, takes a lot of being intentional to ask your employees, your staff, perhaps your clientele, depending on if that is a direction you need to go as well, if they really feel safe and welcomed and included and they feel like they should show up every day and be ready to be heard and listened to. So again, if we're looking to try to share some best practices and strategies with our audience here today, what does that first step look like? Janice, I'd like if you could take a spin on this question. As you think about, again, translating a written statement or policy into meaningful action, for those companies who maybe are already partway into that effort and have a strategy, but they need to assess how effectively that strategy is working, perhaps with a survey of some kind, or for those who haven't yet gotten started or don't know where to begin. What is one example or best practice to get that inclusive policy built and in action that you could suggest?
I think companies, regardless of what it says, okay, now I'm not muted. One suggestion that I would have for everyone, regardless of the size of the company that you work for or work with, is to talk to your employees. And this really, I say this for leaders of companies, because generally you'll tell a manager, go meet with your group or go have a listening session with your group. But if leaders want to see change, it happens at the top. I encouraged our CEO, and he very willingly wanted to talk to our employees and has consistently opened the door to have meaningful dialogue with anybody who wants to talk to him. And I think that's really the key, because he's going to model and is modeling what we want to see across the organization. In that respect, as Christine talked about, really engaging employees and listening to their perspective, because employees may not want to go to their boss and have that conversation. But having somebody at the top of your organization, it could be more than one person that says, we're here for you. We want to listen. We're going to have open time for you to call me, email me. My boss has a Dear David. His name happens to be David. He has a Dear David email address that employees can reach out to him personally and confidentially. And I think that's really, really key. And one of the things that we're doing, I hope to be able to share the results of this when we're done. But for the first time in our company history, and we do engagement surveys all the time, we're actually doing a culture survey. We're putting a lot of energy. We've done a lot of research behind these, and we're going to ask employees very specific questions. I came from a very large organization. 1 or 2 questions were really about cultural diversity. This is an entire survey with those kind of questions. And one of the things that we've said to our team is, we've got to be ready to hear the things that are uncomfortable. And more importantly, we need to be talking about what are we going to do that's different? We're asking people to tell us what they feel, what their experiences have been working for us. What are we going to do about it when we learn about it? So again, that's a huge step. Again, I would say open the door, let employees talk to you as leaders. It's a great first step. And be mindful about what you're willing to do from there and what you learn from there, I think will help make those changes happen in your own organization.
Terrific. Thank you. Christine or Jacqueline, anything that you wanted to touch on in addition to what Janice has shared with us as that first step?
Well, one of the things I'd like to point out is a lot of us have not only leadership, but boards of directors, and as do most corporations. And you've seen people really moving to try and diversify their board so that at that policy level, you're seeing a lot more input from different cultures, people that bring backgrounds from different cities and different countries that I think are the perspective in order to be innovative in your own field today. You have to have input because it's a global world. Even though we do economic development just for Naperville, we run the Visitors Bureau. So I think, Janice, because right now the hospitality industry is a really tough place to be. But when you have global travelers, everybody has to be you know, you have to have that type of diversity that's providing input in your policies. So our board, we're fortunate that we have representation from all the government agencies and each of their superintendents. The school districts have been incredibly, now I speak from Naperville School District and districts, and I'm extremely proud, but they have been so active in, you know, engaging women in STEM. Going back to NICOR, one of the challenges they have is it's typically a man's world. And so getting women to want to be in the oil and gas business takes a real decided effort to bring people through. So I think our schools, Naperville 203 and 204, I think have done a great job in making sure that there's inclusion, but obviously there's always more to be done. Mentoring, I think, is the other thing that's so important. And right now, I think COVID is going to kind of set us on our ear with disproportionate impact to a lot of the different sectors that we're talking about, racially and gender-wise. But I think the last thing I would say is it's not just your business, it's your supply chain. And my friend Marty said they look at not only supply chain, but the sub-suppliers to that chain, and trying to provide opportunity for startup businesses and new businesses. State of Illinois has some great minority entrepreneur programs. We need more effort in helping people access those. So to put something up there to say, we have this available, and there's no assistance for somebody to navigate that, they're not going to be effective. So I do think that that's a big part of the problem. Just putting something on the table is not enough. You have to be able to get them through the process.
Thank you, Christine. Jacqueline, I'd be curious to ask you a question that kind of works off of what Christine just said when it comes to supply chain, because I think a lot of our discussion has been centered on, and importantly so, centered on how to create inclusive environments for our employees and for our clients or customers. But what does it mean for the rest of the network of businesses that come together to provide that ultimate end product for a consumer, or that ultimate end experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of funny she had mentioned supply chain, since I've been doing that for over 25
Right.
years practically. So thank you very much for the lead in. Absolutely true. And that was what I was going to mention too, that it is about the employee, but also because we allow for our employees to have that space during work hours to have groups such as the Black Partner Network, which I'm an executive sponsor of, our Pan-Asian Network, our Indian Network, Women's Network, Armed Forces Network, our Gay, Lesbian, Trans, Queer Plus, and that is our Pride Network. We have 10 networks at Starbucks that are fully endorsed and supported by executive leadership. In addition, since I've been in supply chain for so long, it is super critical for us to look at our supply chain as a mirror to how we do business. And so I'm proud to say that no matter where I've worked in supply chain, we've made that a concerted effort to ensure that we've got a very diverse and full and intentional supply chain. But saying that, and as Janice mentioned, when you often go into supply chain as the discipline, you don't see many people like me. When you go into the supplier base, depending on what the category is, you don't see people like me. And when you go into the facilities that produce the products, when you see people like me, you're usually not looking at them in the boardroom or in the leadership group. So there's still work to be done. Bringing in a diverse supplier is one way. Bringing in a conversation to suppliers who are not diverse but need a diverse workforce is a whole different discussion. So I think therein lies an opportunity for us to use our voice, our position power to say, hey, when I go to your facilities, I don't see people in your queue, in your internship program, in your leadership development program that look diverse. And your customers and your actual staff are diverse at these different levels. And I learned that lesson quite well when I was at McDonald's. And it was really a very fulfilling environment in which we had that conversation holistically. But we continue the conversation. Starbucks is doing a phenomenal job there as well. But that's where you get started, is using your role to make a difference and having that conversation. So then when your employees see you having the conversation, right, they feel courageous enough to say the same things. So when we talk about a new product or opening a new store or looking at new equipment, we think about, can this be an opportunity for a diverse supplier? And I don't use the word minority anymore because I feel like that minimizes the people in which make the business happen every day, because what they are is diverse, and we like diversity and inclusiveness. But one more piece too about those words, and I think you started that out, Mina, when we talked about diversity, inclusion, and also equity, but also accessibility, making it easy, safe, and simple. So people can get in there, Christine, to your point, and it's not complicated, right? You see the sign, we accept diverse suppliers. Well, then how do I even get started? How do I get your attention? How do I showcase my wares? And so we need to make space for that as well. But these are quite, you know, to me, learned behaviors, and they have to be reinforced and endorsed and intentionally pushed by the leadership of the organization. And it does start at the top. So I appreciate the question very much.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. I'm glad you made reference to our definitions, because I do want to shift gears just slightly with the next question and talk just a bit about equity, because we have focused a lot of the discussion on inclusion and inclusivity. But again, as we look to provide our audience members with some best practices or ideas to launch or maintain a strategy, how do responsibilities vary across an organization when it comes to driving equity? You know, because a lot of times we have organizations who, again, like Christine mentioned, don't have a great deal of resources at their disposal, may not have any one person who's going to be in charge of developing and leading a lot of these efforts. So how do the responsibilities vary throughout an organization? And Janice, could you take this one to start when you think about driving equity for all of the stakeholders involved?
I know that's a great question. I could probably spend an hour talking about equity, but
right.
What's important to remember, and I think the panelists have said this, is that everyone in a decision-making role, in a management level role, whoever's making those decisions, everybody has to be on the same page, right? So we can't have these policies, these value statements, and not have everybody in alignment. Jackie made it very clear about Starbucks and how leaders have to show up and be aligned. I tell people all the time, you don't have to believe in my philosophy, but if you come to work for us, and this is what we believe as an organization, then you're expected to align with those beliefs and drive that across the organization. Otherwise, the consistency will hurt you in the long run. There's a lot that's been discussed here, and I'm very passionate about this topic and have been my entire career. And serving in an HR role, I tell people all the time, I think, well, big companies can do this, small companies can't do this. I've worked in all different size organizations. Like someone said on the panel, let's make it easy, let's not make it hard. Let's make it easy. We all have access to community groups and organizations that are diverse. That's the easiest thing you can do. You can pick up the phone in Naperville and call diverse organizations and find out how to attract talent. Every college, I believe every college, regardless of what level, if it's a junior college, if it's a state college, if it's a university system, will have diversity and inclusion programs. They have access to people. They have access to your future talent that you want to work for. So when people come to me and say, I can't find diverse talent, I don't buy it. It's not true. We all have access and it's easy. I think it's about teaching people how easy it is and where they can find support and find help. There's a lot of internship programs out there as well that can support you. Again, equity is something I think we're going to be talking about for a long time, especially as it relates to women in the workplace, how we're paid compared to men, the availability for advancement for women as you look at boards of directors. I had a company call and say, you know, we actually, there was a study done in hospitality where they looked at the boards of a lot of top hospitality firms, and just such a small percent of women are represented there. So our work is not done until we are able to look at this landscape and say we are fully understand diversity and inclusion, and our women have an opportunity to be successful in the roles that men typically have. So I know I've covered a lot more than what you asked for, but I wanted to importantly pass along the tips on hiring and engaging and getting to talent that is diverse in your own communities.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Yes, and you're absolutely right that we could talk for much longer about the subject of equity itself, and I do believe that that will likely be the subject of a future event that we host as part of this committee of diversity, equity, and inclusion through the chamber. So stay tuned for that. But at this point, I do want to make sure to include some of the questions we've been getting from our audience. So thank you to those of you who have submitted them. And please know that you can continue to pop some questions there in the chat as we continue. So the first one that I want to pose to the group is, given the membership of the chamber, what specific initiatives or learnings should small and mid-sized business leaders be concentrating on in developing inclusion in their business practices? So, Christine, I wonder if you can take this one. Small and mid-sized business leaders, what should their focus be?
Well, one of the things we've established at our office is we have, and I think Jacqueline alluded to this too, is our head of HR and accounting is what I would call the safe person, right? So for any problem, large and small, and she really does connect, I think, with each and every employee each week, even though she's part-time. But I believe, and I've seen, that any and all of my employees feel very comfortable in going and speaking with Ann. So having sort of that safe zone where people feel they can be heard, and if they have any issue, a lot of it having to do with I don't know, daycare, COVID, remote, safety, all of these things are top of mind right now. But we also tap into resources, the Chamber of Commerce, the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, the city of Naperville and their programs. You know, we're sort of a public-private, so we have that access. But we do tap into some of what our hotels are doing and what our businesses are doing, and our board members help share some of their best practices. So I think, as Jana said, there are so many resources out there and people are so generous. So for small businesses, I would say, you know, first and foremost, the Chamber of Commerce is absolutely your best resource. Any small business that's not a member is really missing out on the value there. And Kaylin, you can thank me later, but no, but I believe that, and I think that's an important component. So, and I know the people asking the question are members of the chamber, so they can see that the benefits that they get from that. And the chamber is open to new programming. Like I said, I watched Janice on her and Kim did a session on NCTV, and it was fabulous. It was Business Connects, and I learned so much. So I'm thrilled to be on a panel with you.
Very good. Thank you, Christine. This next audience question I would like to direct to Jacqueline. It goes back to our definition of diversity, and in that it is many different elements or qualities that we are considering. It's not just only the few perhaps that are most commonly thought of. So this question reads, as a Latina, I'd like someone to speak to the fact that people of color are not looking to be hired only for the diversity they bring, but that we want people to know that we are good fits, that we are experienced, we are business savvy, that we are the best candidate. And what we are looking for is the opportunity. We want to be taken seriously, known for what we bring. That sense of worth should not be lost. So what can you say to that?
I totally agree. It's that simple. You know, as an African-American woman, I don't want to be brought into an organization just because of what I am. It's what I can contribute and what I've done. And I stand tall on my achievements. You know, you can only write so much in your bio, your resume, but the personal and professional experience of going through transitions and roles, leading teams, working internationally as a person of color in China, you know, and going through major crises with a sense of we can get through this and bringing teams along with you and succeeding. Those are things that are real. And so I was hired for those reasons. And I always say it's a plus up, you know, it's because I am an African-American woman that I can achieve even more, because I'm built for resiliency. I'm built for, you know, stick-to-itiveness. optimism in its rare form. It's not like unrealistic. Optimism is optimism, and it brings people toward you with a vengeance, and they want to follow and actually lead for you. So absolutely, I always recruit and hire people who are competent first and foremost. But I do search intentionally for people of color and women. And I'm going to say that over and over again. If you look at my track record in my teams, I do just that. And so my goal is to leave it better than I found it. I tend to do that with both the work and the talent. And so there's no exception to people who have skills, but you got to bring those first. And even as I tell people who work for me, it's perfectly fine to be involved in our affinity groups. It's perfectly in the cases that you need to have a safe space to operate in, to talk through things. You need to have that as a release, because often you still feel like you're the only one. And I tend to be sometimes the only one in the room. But with that said, you got to do your job first. So get your job done with excellence like nobody else can, and continue to indulge in those things that make you whole. But I hope that this person who asked the question is putting forth their skills and their experiences as the reason why they should be hired or thought of, or be an entrepreneur. You don't have to work for people. You can be the employer, right? So that's the other piece of it as well.
Great, thank you. Janice, I've got one I want to spin in your direction, and it is on a similar vein. The way that this question reads, it says, I'm new to the chamber, but I would like to encourage everyone to think of inclusion for those with mental and physical disabilities. The conversation today seems to be aimed at those with cultural or ethnic differences. Some adaptations for those with these disabilities may be needed, but they are excellent employees who stay in the job for years and rarely call in sick. So how do you look through the lens of ability as being factored into your diversity and inclusion policies and practices?
Great question, and I saw that pop up, so I'm glad that you threw that question to me. Obviously, on all companies, we have to be mindful of what inclusiveness means, and it does include those with special abilities or inabilities to do work, and they come to the table fighting just as hard as any other employee. So I don't want us to be lost on that, but I think our program today is focused on diversity and inclusion purposefully because of what's happening in society right now. That doesn't mean that we don't have diverse employees with physical opportunities as well that work for us. That is important to keep in mind. It's important to embrace those individuals as well. So I'm glad that the individual wrote that question. It's something that has to be top of mind, and hopefully companies are more open in today's environment and accepting people that may have an inability to some degree to work for their companies, especially when we see people that are working from home, right? We've all been working from home, many of us, for many months now. I think companies are looking outside of what they thought they needed was an office and a desk in a building to get work done, and we've all figured out ways to work around that to the best that we can. So I think we have to continue that conversation. I'm challenged every day. I'm the only female on an all-white male executive team. A lot of times they're silent, it's quiet because they don't know what to say. I say they don't know what to say because I'm in the room, or they don't know what to say because they may be afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. But until we can be all brave enough to have the difficult conversation, we're not going to be able to move forward in business, and that's important. Jackie said something that just, it's a reminder every day when you're the one female or person of color on a team or a leadership team, that going into the job every day. Most importantly, and I'm reminded of this every time I walk into a hotel or I'm able to talk to our employees, that I represent so many more. I represent women. I represent a lot of people of color who want to either be where I am or hope that I will represent them when I'm at the table. And it's a heavy weight, but I take it with pride and I take with passion that I have a job to do. I have to carry their voice forward when nobody else in the room may know how to do that. And so I take that seriously, regardless of the employee. We want to make sure that all these voices are heard. And, if we're in a company that wants to call ourselves inclusive, and stand up and let's be inclusive. It's either or. It's not somewhere in between. Today I want to do what's right and, and power to the people. And tomorrow, it's all about something else. We have to drive business results, and we can get that from broadening our scope in terms of what we're looking for, in terms of bringing different people and perspectives to the table.
Wonderful, thank you. No, so as I'm thinking more about this question and about your response, Janice, one of the things that has been meaningful for me in understanding ability as an element of diversity and inclusion is that disability does not mean inability. And what that also reminds me of is, I think, Jacqueline, you made a comment that a lot of times how we are perceived as individuals and what we bring to the table is very visible at first, right? It's how we present visually to the people around us, but that again puts a limit on what our true, full, whole, authentic self is. And you can't get to that insight without doing exactly what each of you has recommended, which is talking to your employees, listening to them, understanding what their internal concerns are, beyond what may be simply visible and exposed, at first sight or first impression, is really digging deep and understanding what those needs are. And I do think that's how we get to addressing some of these other elements of diversity that we perhaps have not been speaking to as directly in this one conversation, but to be sure not to let those fall off the table.
Could I add to that?
Yes, please.
Just because what you bring up, and we're talking about some disabilities are less visible. I work with Edward Hospital's Linden Oaks on their board of directors, and mental health issues. But as an employer, we have to be very careful also about questions we can ask, whether it's age or background or different issues. And I'm sort of reminded of our new superintendent from 204. They were doing the interviews in the hallway and in an evening, and I was leaving the building, and Dr. Talley was sitting out in the hallway waiting, and so he was hired. And when we had our first interview, I said, I have to tell you, I met you once, walking to the elevator, and you couldn't have been more kind. You were so nice. And he said, of course, the building was mostly empty, so anybody walking through there might have been part of my interview team and whether or not I was going to hire you. But it's really the point that you need to be authentic all the time. And you need to understand that somebody may be acting out in a different way, and you don't know why, and you can't pry as a employer, but you need to be open and sensitive that these people are bringing everybody brings baggage. I don't care what your life was growing up. Everybody brings part of their background to the table. And I think it's important that you always be kind, because potentially everybody has some sort of an issue, and you need to be very, very open to that. When we talk about inherent biases, and that's across the board. You can have inherent biases for people with disabilities, for people with mental health issues, and you might not know they have a mental health issue. So I'm just saying a lot of that are things we can't ask, we can't bring out, and employees might not want to talk about. But as a leader, you need to be, and a supervisor, you need to have sort of that intuitive sense. Yes,
absolutely. Thank you so much. So believe it or not, we are at the time limit here for our Q&A, and so I do apologize to those folks who submitted questions that we didn't quite get to. But the last poll question that I do want to propose to everyone to answer is about putting actions behind the words. And so what we're asking here is, would you be willing to post inclusive signage in your business? So let's take maybe about 20 to 30 seconds and try to get as many responses in here as we can. I'm going to ask Kim to reflect on the results once they're ready. And in these last couple seconds here, as people are responding, before I forget, I do absolutely want to thank our three speakers today, Jacqueline Howard, Christine Jeffries, and Janice Parks. You have shared a tremendous amount of insight. Thank you so very much for making time for us this morning. I'm sure we all have plenty to reflect on as we go about our days today. So here, maybe another 10 seconds, and we'll post the results of this final poll. Would you be willing to post inclusive signage in your business?
Right. All right. So there we have it. There are those results. So thank you. First, before I, reflect on the poll, the poll question, I want to just say, first of all, thank you, Mina. You did an amazing job. And I also want to thank Christine, Jackie, and Janice for, providing a lot of great, relevant, and very timely information. Christine, you touched on, one person doesn't feel included, the whole team doesn't feel included, and that is so important. Again, speaking to the importance of inclusion. Jackie, your comment about using your voice and your position power when you walk into a room to have that conversation, very powerful. And to your point, you spoke about how it empowers your employees, so it's very, very important. And then Janice, you referenced being deliberate, purposeful, and not having policies and value statements that are not aligned. So all those things have to be very consistent. All three of you, I think, shared, the work is not done, and it's very important that we continue to fight the good fight there. As leaders, I know all three of you walk the walk, and that's very important for those who are looking to you in your roles. So thank you. In reflecting on the poll question, it's great to see where we are in terms of the number of folks who, I think it's 72% that are speaking to the fact that it's important to have those signs. Last year, my husband and I vacationed on both coasts. So we were on the East Coast for a little while. We then went out west. I was able to spend some time with Jackie when we were out there. And one of the things we noticed pretty consistently is stores having visible signage, welcoming signage on their storefront. And these signs spoke to being inclusive. So welcome all, Black Lives Matter, pride flags, and that was very important to us. And it got to the point where when we did not see those signs, we were intentional about not going into those stores or those restaurants, or a business, if you will. So I think businesses really should be thoughtful. Think about what message you are sending to folks as they are, the patrons that you're looking to do business with. Those signs made a difference for us. And that's one of the things that I know as our committee, we are looking to provide here in Naperville, some sort of signage that businesses will make the choice to put on their storefront. And so I don't know if any of you want to chime in on that before we turn it over to Carlos for some final thoughts. But I think signage is very important and it made a difference for us. So I just wanted to share that. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Carlos for some final thoughts.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone. Carlos Padilla from the Naperville Convention Visitors Bureau. I also want to thank our three participants, Jacqueline, Christine, and Janice. Three different, so diverse backgrounds, and it's interesting to see how everybody kind of has to deal with some of the same issues that we all do in regards to equity and inclusion. As Jacqueline mentioned earlier about wanting to see herself in success, bringing the best self to work is one of the things that most of us, when we really look and reflect, is probably what we all want to do, regardless of our background and where we are at. Also, as Janice mentioned, change starts at the top and it trickles down, and you need to have pride in your job. And being a Latino man, as the one question that came through, I think she hit it right on the money. As Christine Jeffries mentioned, and I will have to say, she also manages the Convention Visitors Bureau, which I represent. And I'll just tell you that everything that Christine has said this morning, she lives and breathes it every single day. This is not just something that she mentions just because it sounds good. I remember during my interview, and once we identified that I was qualified and I could do the job, then it became a personal reason when she said, be kind. This is an office where we all respect and we are all kind to each other, which is a word not very used in an interview. So I thought that was very interesting. And during that interview, I shared part of myself being, you know, obviously Latino, and talked a little bit about my partner, Paul. She didn't skip a beat. She kept up through the interview, and she entrusted with me being literally, as she put it one time, the face of the Bureau. It's a very high profile position that I have, and it's important to see people like myself in the community representing all the hotels that we have. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody, and Christine as well, obviously, for the opportunity. And also want to make sure that there's going to be a poll that's going to follow up. So please make sure you let us know how we did, and look out for our next event. So far, this is our second one, and we'll be having a third one pretty soon too. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And I think in the chat, Mina or someone put in the reference to the Starbucks on unconscious bias training. So you all